Hey, I'm a game developer and I made this game in 90 days. I also made this game in 90 days. I also am making this game in 90 days. And I also help other developers make their games as quickly as possible. The reason why I'm sharing all of this is because time is the most valuable resource we have and we should not waste it at all. Making games is something that already takes a long time to do, and if done correctly, you can get a really good return of investment. And so, with everything that you have to do, I really believe that it's hypercritical to not waste time and to make games as quickly as possible. Being said, today I'm going to teach you some of the habits that I take in order to make games as quickly as possible, and I'm going to break down this discussion in three major points: personal lifestyle choices, how I use my techniques, and a bulletproof mindset system that'll allow you to think differently about making games. Without further ado, let's begin. So let's start off with the personal lifestyle choices I recommend in order for you to accelerate your work. And the very first thing I'm going to tell you is you must erase the relationship you have with your phone. You can clearly see back in the day, you could flip a phone, type a couple of numbers, and have a conversation with your friend. And that's what it was back then. Now, it's probably the greatest tool of all time since it provides for quite literally almost everything. The biggest issue with this is that it will also be the number one distraction in your life right now. It'll halt your progress, it'll stop your production, and it'll distract you. So you have to be very wise about it. There's many ways that you can go about, putting like a do not disturb mode, trying to not use your phone in general, building habits to kind of avoid using the phone. But in general, if you're the type of person that uses your phone for quite literally everything, you're probably not going to be as productive as possible unless, all of your work is done virtually on the phone, right? Being said, please watch out for this. And if you understand that you have a high screen time on your phone, please, please, please start getting in the habit of just walking away from it, trying to not use it as much as possible, and recognize the actual damage it is that you'll have if you just continue to use this over and over again. You will also get bonus points if you develop a hobby where you're able to go ahead and focus on something that builds your attention, something like reading, for example. All right. Of course, be careful with your hobbies as well. You want to use it on your proper downtime. More on that in just a bit. The second thing I'm going to tell you, very critical too, and this is also kind of related with the phone, is you must avoid pornography and doom scrolling at all times. I say this, and I know this is a very sensitive topic, but it is very addictive. It is a vice, and it basically becomes an infinite distraction. And it's easier said than done to say, oh, let me just go ahead and walk away from an addictive source, right? I completely understand that. Being said, I did make a video on how to help you quit porn and, doom scrolling as well. And I genuinely recommend you guys checking that out if that's something that you're currently struggling with. But ultimately, you have to recognize that porn will destroy your dopamine receptors. It'll be very, very anti productive for you. You basically become more foggy, and it's just very hard to focus. And it's overall just not a net positive at all. And you should really find ways to get out of it. And if you're going to be making games, which requires so much work, so much input, so much output, you really, really need to have a sharp mind no matter what. The next thing I'm going to talk about is front loading your tasks. Okay. This is your chores. This is if you can cook, try to meal prep, try to have leftovers, try to do everything in the morning. If you work out, try to do it again at the first thing in the morning that you can do so that you have the entire day to yourself. If there is a dedicated day that you use to clean, good. But if you're just kind of like cleaning on the spot, up to you. Really, the whole point is you want to stay as organized as possible because the more efficient you are at following your routine, the faster you become, which is really important. The only big caveat with all of this is you probably have a job. And, most of us work 8 hours whenever we do a shift. And clearly, that's probably the thing that takes most of the time during our day. Totally fine, super acceptable. But also, if you can do all of your chores and then you do work, and then as soon as you get out of work and you have like these 4 to 5 hours of, free time, that's where you want to utilize that time to go ahead and work on your game, be productive, do all the things that you have to do. In other words, all I'm trying to say is, hey, if there are things and obstacles that you can get rid of as quickly as possible so that you can maximize your time, that'll be very productive for you. All right. So again, the more you practice your own routine, the faster you'll become, which allows you to generate more excess time, which you can then use to go ahead and do what you have to do. Speaking of excess time, one of the biggest issues that I've encountered recently, and I've been able to correct this, is not knowing what to do with my time, right? It's so easy to say, oh, I have all this free time, so let me go ahead and like start making sprites, or let me go ahead and make music, or let me go ahead and program, right? And this is kind of paradoxical when you think about it, but the ability to allocate your exact time is going to be one of the most important tools you'll ever use. If I said, oh, I have 5 hours to do what I have to do, or whatever I want, you basically have the opportunity to lose 5 hours. Now, if I said, oh, in these 5 hours, I'm going to go ahead and, schedule 1 hour to do sprites, 1 hour to do music, 1 hour to do programming, 1 hour, like you allocating time will allow you to be more productive with what needs to be done on the spot. In other words, if you're too free or if you don't have any restrictions, counterintuitively, you're not going to make progress. So I really recommend you getting a calendar, both the physical one and the ones that you have on your phone or, or your computer. Think about like a Google Drive calendar, and just start filling it out with all the important things that you have to do. And by you tasking what is necessary, you'll be able to go ahead and perform those tasks at that given time. It's one thing to say, oh, let me put on the calendar. It's another to say, let me put on the calendar and respect it. Let me make sure I actually follow through with my words. All right. Very important to practice that habit, because that will give you the ability to, schedule your time. And again, prove to you that you'll go ahead and just, oh, if I put that down on the calendar, then I have to go ahead and perform what I instated for myself. That's going to be a very, 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 very powerful tool for you to use going forward. And this is something that I wish I could have done a little bit more early. Speaking of calendars, the one thing I have to tell you first, and this is very repetitive because I've said this a bajillion times, please put an alarm clock to go to bed, not an alarm clock to wake you up. You'll thank me for that later when you recognize how your internal clock will wake you up automatically for you, and that you can have a little bit more energy and not be disrupted when you actually get up in the morning. All right. So find a bedtime, put an alarm clock for that, and then go ahead and try this habit and watch how it works wonders. All right. The other thing, and we just talked about this briefly, is hey, just have zero tolerance for distractions. Again, there's a lot of ways that you can go ahead and limit the ability to be distracted. Do not disturb, monochrome colors, just trying to find a way to embrace boredom, and putting limits on your apps. That's really important at the end of the day. The less likely you are to look at something or to be distracted, the more likely you are to be more focused on the activity at hand. All right. So just if you have the ability to, again, put these settings and these customization options to just like stop being distracted, they will help you out for a reason. And they're designed for that, right? So just make sure that you utilize them properly. Now, one other thing that I really want to talk about here is there is going to be a lot of activities you will do as a game developer that you'll believe is important, just to realize like 80% of the tasks you do don't really matter. And this isn't to sound pessimistic or messed up, but the reality is a lot of the games that we make or a lot of features that we make end up getting cut or simply are like not as impressive or doesn't really carry the source of like what makes the game, right? So whenever you're building something, I always recommend you making sure that you work on the core systems and the gameplay loop first. And then once you have all of that done, you can then worry about polishing and all the other artifacts later. In other words, try to make your prototype ugly, polish it later, but just make sure that the game works. Okay. Obviously, there's other steps as well, such as playtesting and other processes that we'll talk here momentarily about. But I really want to exaggerate the point that what you think is important probably is not that important. Okay. And this kind of leads to the second point that I really want to talk about, where if you're a developer and you take this iterative approach, right? That's kind of like the recommended way to go through making a game. And I have a controversial opinion, and I really think that's probably not the best way to go through it just yet. The key here is if you know what the ending of your game's production looks like, you'll have a significantly easier time to actually just building your game as a whole, right? If you said, oh, well, I don't know what to do, I don't really know what to make, then yeah, an iterative approach shouldn't hurt. But at the same time, you have to recognize that you'll just be building and building and building until you either bloat your project, you overscope, or you just have so many features and no direction. The roadmap and the endpoint is going to be your best friend in the game production cycle. Because with this, you're basically enlisting every single task possible about what you need to have in order to make your gameplay loop, work. And then you have the systems, you have all the features necessary, the content, art, everything that you need. After you've established that, you then have direction, you know what to do, and then you just basically can start working towards that end goal where you can commercially launch a game. Applying a timeline to that makes you make games ridiculously quickly. This is going to be very, very important going forward, okay? Now, I mentioned all of this because I made various videos about how to do roadmaps, how to write endpoints, how to know your goals, how to actually scope your project correctly. And so I recommend you checking out my channel for that, right? But if you actually just want to have a consultation call where you can go ahead and talk to me directly, where I can see your game, see your idea, or maybe you already like, maybe you have a game idea, maybe you don't, maybe you just want to like try to get more progress on that, then feel free to go ahead and book a call with me where I can go ahead and provide you a roadmap, tools, I can save you time. And basically, I'm just going to speed run the development process for you, okay? Now, this is very important, but also this is something that you have to keep in mind. Another habit that's going to be critical for you to imbue is going to be what's called the monotask orientation, okay? This sounds very boring because it is very boring, all right? I'm going to be the first one to tell you this is a very, very, very boring thing to do. This basically means I want you to work on one task at a time. This means do not switch until the entire task is completed, okay? And what does that mean? Well, let's say I want to animate a character. Okay, well, I probably need to design the character first, select the colors, do a prototype sprite, and then basically start animating all the frames, okay? Animating, for example, could be very boring because you have to write like 48 sprites, you have to readjust, you have to do all these frames. There's a lot of work to do in the animation process. And so human nature really wants us to kind of just like do the easiest path possible, right? We're very resistive when there's something hard or difficult to do. And so what happens is maybe you do the design, you choose the colors, and you're like, you know what? I don't want to animate today. I'll just like jump to music. I'll do programming. I'll do something else because like I'll feel more productive that way. And the biggest issue with this jump from going from one place to another is that you just absolutely lose your flow state completely. You might have the ability to flow into a different task, and that's fine. But the whole point is you really want to drill the idea of working with something really boring and really taxing and something that takes like a while to do so that you just get rid of that obstacle and you can go ahead and make more progress on your game. If you design color, then just jump to music, well, you're not reaching the endpoint that you're supposed to get to. But if you did the design color, then you sprited, then you did the animations, well, then you're way significantly closer to actually just like taking down each task so that you can go ahead and get closer to launching your game. All right. One more thing I'm gonna say, and this was also kind of like a funny lesson I had to learn over the past year, was I believed that balance doesn't exist, which I still stand firm to that. I do think if you're going to work, you have to work as hard as possible. But I also do believe that there's a mode that you can get into where you have the hermit mode, where you just lock yourself in your room, you just do absolutely nothing but work, 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 and there is a lot of production with that. There's a lot of progress you can make, but it's also one of the quickest ways to go ahead and burn out. Now, I do believe you can resist burnout if you have a proper schedule, if you're professional with your work, if you actually take time to relax and such. But also, you can't try to like hang out every single time you have an opportunity. You shouldn't be going out 24/7. Like you have to go ahead and prioritize your work. There are sacrifices that you have to make, and there's balance that you have to throw out the window no matter what. What I will say is that if you do decide to hang out, relax, go on a date, take a vacation, don't do it half-assedly. Okay, as in like you really want to make sure that if you're working hard, you do 200%. You try to work as much as possible. You try to like not overdo yourself, but really just do everything possible for that. Okay, but if you're gonna go ahead and relax, turn off your brain. Don't halfway in your hangout realize, oh, I should have stayed home. I should probably go ahead and like start working on my game right now. Like, no, no, no. You chose the time to relax, so you should commit to doing that no matter what. Vice versa. If you're working, don't stop and then say, oh, I should hang out. Like, make sure that you follow your commitments. And this is why I call it the true leisure point. True because you have to commit to actually what you're going to do. If you're going to hang out all the way. If you're going to work out all the way. All right. The other thing I'm going to talk about here is external deadlines. Okay. And on this channel, you will hear me talk infinitely about Parkinson's law, which is basically how when you allocate time, you just end up getting the most amount of production done. Okay. The best example to describe this is simply homework. Okay. If I gave you a homework assignment and said, hey, today's Monday, and I want you to turn in your assignment on Friday, the reality based on human nature is you're probably going to not do anything Monday, not do anything Tuesday. Wednesday, you might give it a look. Thursday would most likely be the day you actually do the work. And then Friday, you turn in the assignment. All right. Now, if you noticed, Monday and Tuesday just went out the window. We had 48 hours to possibly do something, but we just kind of didn't do anything about it. In fact, we were procrastinating because, again, human nature likes to do take the path of least resistance, right? So if I said, hey, instead of Friday, why don't I change the deadline to Wednesday? Well, suddenly Monday, you'll look at it. Tuesday, you'll do the work. And then Wednesday, you'll go ahead and turn in the actual assignment. In other words, it's not that you need more time, it's that you actually need less time to be more serious about your work, or at least to start like making effort towards writing progress, right? And this is super critical because this is literally the concept of Parkinson's law. I always said, like, hey, making a game does take a lot of time, but it doesn't have to take 3 years. It could take 90 days. It could take 4 months. It could take 2 months. You could really, really chop down everything down if you have the task list, if you have the roadmap, if you have the endpoint, if you have strong habits, but also if you really see every single feature that your game actually needs to be a successful, commercial game, you're going to realize it's not that many that you need. And then you start to realize and start picking up the pieces and you're like, wait, I only need 500 hours. I don't need that many features. The quality of the work is still can still be really good, right? Rushing doesn't a, a low amount of time doesn't necessarily equate to rushing or getting a bad quality project. It just all comes down to the decisions that you make that are powerful. And so this is why it's super critical to understand how powerful a deadline is. It pushes you to the finish line. More fuel to the fire is what I learned recently is when your deadline is external. Okay. So if you had a game jam, if you had a next fest, if you had a booth, if you had a launch date and you couldn't change that date, suddenly as a developer, you're going to make every single decision possible to absolutely make sure that your project will be done by that time. And so I say, hey, Parkinson's law is important. Make sure you put a deadline, follow the deadline, respect the deadline. But to challenge you even further is to make your deadline public, external, and something that allows you to take accountability as a person and as a developer. So next time you have a project, or if you currently have a project, I 100% recommend you going ahead and make a deadline, but also make a Steam page. Why don't you, put a little deadline on your Steam page? Hey, on February we're gonna launch, and like try everything possible to not change the date, so that by January, by the end of December, you reflect on your project and you recognize, whoa, can I cut content? Am I close? Do I need this feature? Which decisions matter? That's where you're going to start seeing a ridiculous amount of progress. All right. And the last thing I'm going to say about the personal life here is I genuinely recommend everyone to develop a prayer life. Okay. I believe that we all have a mission and a purpose, and that the more we reflect for ourselves and for the sake of others, we can have the ability to improve. Okay. A prayer in the morning, a prayer at night, being grateful for everything that we have. It allows us to ground ourselves in reality and, more importantly, recognize what our mission is. It's super easy to get stuck with our goals and our milestones and want to achieve a bajillion things, and that's absolutely beautiful and wonderful. You should not be shy about that. But it's also very important to recognize where you are at life and just be very grateful for what we have. All right. Being said, these are the personal lifestyle choices I have personally taken in order to speedrun making my games and helping other developers with their games. Now we're going to jump to the next section. So now we're going to talk about the development decisions, which are basically the techniques you can use to speedrun game dev. And the first one I'm going to talk about is called asset pooling. I've said this in many videos before, but the long story short is if you have the ability to access assets, both from your own projects or from public repos, stores, shops, etc., you can go ahead and actually just utilize those tools to just get what you need in order to move forward. This includes animations, models, systems, frameworks, right? If it already exists, why do we have to spend so much time hassling and building our own systems? Of course, if you realize, hey, in your own game design, you have to build something custom for your game, totally fine, totally understandable. That's actually part of the process of being a developer. But if it's something very standard or something that's already accessible and already exists, there's no harm in grabbing that. All right. So I really do believe asset pooling is going to be one of those techniques that absolutely just is a game changer, saves a bunch of time, and ultimately just helps you out no matter what. The second thing is going to be a little controversial, and I do believe that you can go ahead and make a dirty coded game. And what that basically means is, what if you program something so and so pragmatic, or so this is exactly what I need, to the point where it may not be so scalable, and that's kind of where the issue comes in and everything. But if it performs the functionality that you're looking for, then that's what all that matters, right? Well, there's kind of like two thought processes with this, right? I would tell you, you can make as much dirty code as you want as long as you understand it and as long as your game, actually works, right? If the functionality of the code performs what you're looking for, that's good news. Now, dirty code becomes an issue when your game gets laggy, when there's issues, when there's bugs. It becomes more of a hassle over time. So obviously, yeah, if you have the ability to make cleaner code first, then that'll be super good, right? But I would also encourage you to never shackle or never like stay down on like, oh well, it's not perfect code, so I can't like launch it. Like, no, dirty code's okay. Just make sure there's no issues with it. At the same time, this brings another premise, right? And I believe, myself included, there are a bunch of developers that have this huge temptation called, let me redo my game. Have you ever been in the spot where, you basically are maybe 50%, 30% done with your game, and you realize, man, I learned a lot of lessons. I could probably just redo it and it'll be super clean. It'll have all the cool code base. It'll be great. If I redid everything from scratch, 100%, I'm gonna make something super good, and I'm gonna make a game that's like 10 times better. Okay. The issue with that statement is we tend to overestimate how much work we actually end up doing when we redo the process. If anything, you're basically doing double the amount of work, plus you're not accounting for new bugs that you're finding in your quote unquote optimized system. And we don't really know what perfect code looks like until you look at it retrospectively from a very like long time period, right? Being said, I am recommending you that if you have a project right now, or if there is a side project that you had in the back, don't discard it or don't redo it. I would tell you grab it, refurbish it, fix it, and try to just make sure that you have a working game loop and the systems that you need, right? And it's just way more effective, efficient, faster, resourceful for you to build something that already exists rather than making it all the way from scratch. If you're a first time game developer or you don't have a project yet, yeah, of course you have to do it from scratch, obviously, right? But if you are a developer that's had multiple games, maybe you can some, maybe you're on the verge of making a decision of should I redo it, should I not? Just take what you have and keep building upon it. You can always fix it later, you can always address issues later, but it's just more practical and faster for you to take this approach. And I also have to tell you this because I myself made my same game 3 times. I made Dodge King, Dodge King Mini, and then Dodge King Deluxe. Dodge King Mini was not released, by the way. But basically, I made the same game 3 different times, and nobody flinched an eye or batted an eye, right? But the thing is, Dodge King had a strong dodging system, and then Dodge King Deluxe introduced roguelike elements, right? And so you can iterate on your game as much as you want, but when you iterate from game to game, you build your asset pooling. You basically can address dirty code going forward. Like you just end up getting more value and more resources over time when you just make more games. Okay. Not only are you increasing your portfolio and your understanding of how to code, how to program, how to make structures, how to design, but again, you just get access to more resources. Okay. It's really good. In my current game that I'm making, Another Chance at Happiness, I'm borrowing systems from Dodge King. It's dodge system, it's upgrades, the movement, but I'm also adding the new things that I want for the new game. Okay. Being said, another thing I want to talk about very briefly is when you are making your game, right? There's this design process that you have to go through. And when you take an iterative approach, which is basically, hey, let me like have the sandbox and let me add this character, let me add this, let me add that, you end up making this system of things that on paper it works, right? Like, yeah, iterative design absolutely can work and everything. But when you don't have direction or when you don't know what your endpoint is at the end of the day, you're going to end up just building and building and building with no real direction. And this is where overscoping comes in. This is where development hell comes in. This is where all of the core issues of development truly, truly come in. Okay. I've mentioned earlier, hey, making a roadmap is going to be the number one tool that you'll go ahead and use to just absolutely understand where you are, where you need to go, and how to actually get there. And again, if you add a time frame with it, you're going to get there even quickly, okay? Because Parkinson's law and other things. Being said, when you do write the roadmap, you can then establish what are the steps you need to take to build your game. And the first thing that you have to do is not only enlist every single dependency, but build every single dependency system first, okay? It's going to be a little bit complicated if you don't do it without a roadmap. Again, if you just do the iterative approach of, oh, let me add a card system halfway into development, but then I realize, oh, the card system is going to affect all of these other properties that I previously made. Well, now you just have these huge structures that you just have to modify as much as possible. You can completely avoid that headache as soon as you create the dependencies first, and then you get rid of those obstacles. And the beautiful part about this is that if you have all these systems laid out, all the dependencies are done, you get rid of like the boring part of like, oh yeah, this is kind of slow and a little bit weird because like you're seeing a lot of systems without visuals necessarily is kind of like why it's such a boring and slow process. But once you have all of that done, you can then dump the artistic content. So you can have again the polished artwork, the animations, the characters, the models, the rigs, the everything. Like that's where basically all the content creation part can come into, and it'll make your development style ridiculously easy. Okay. And the reason why I say this is because roadmaps will help you define your dependencies and they'll also help you define your parameters. And so, one thing to remember is if you're going to go ahead and build a system, well, what does your system need, right? For example, if you're doing a card system, does it have attack? Does it have input? Does it have elemental typings? Does it have modifiable variables? Does it have the ability to upgrade itself? Does it cost something? Does it have mana, right? These are things you have to establish super early so that you can just build things way more quickly. Again, if you build this halfway through development, you're just overcomplicating every single system out there. And so I'm also going to talk about it super briefly that, we can talk about systems and structures and parameters and dependencies, but all of this hinges directly on your core gameplay loop. And so you can have this wonderful story idea, you can have great music, you can have cool characters. There's a bunch of ideas that you can have that can generate games, and that's brilliant, that's amazing. But what I will say is that for every system you ever make, it must relate, it must respect, and it must abide to the 3 main events you will make that create your core gameplay loop. I believe firmly that every single gameplay loop can be broken down into 3 events. What those 3 events are completely dependent on the type of game that you're making, right? But those 3 events will then generate all the structures you need, all the systems you need, all the dependencies. And from that, then everything becomes more cohesive and it'll become an easier way to design your game. So, for example, if I said, hey, I'm making a game about sparing monsters, right? Then, yeah, I'm going to have monster characters. I'm probably going to have monster properties. I'm probably going to have elemental typings, right? And then based off of all of that, oh, well, there's probably going to be these type of animations, these type of colors, these type of environments. This is the story that happens. This is the music that occurs. Again, all of these systems hinge on the 3 main events. So again, all your dependencies, all your parameters, everything that you'll ever delegate, that's super dependent on the core design of the game. Speaking of delegation, if you have a team or if you have the ability to outsource, again, think about asset pooling, right? 100% you can go ahead and use that to your advantage to save a lot of time. For example, here on the right, on the left, you'll go ahead and see this concept art that I had of like what the Dodge King logo should be about. Contacted an artist friend, Pun Pun Arts, very talented artist, and she took that art, made it into what you currently see on the left, on the right, and basically we have something that pops up more, looks way more pleasing and such. And apparently that took like 8 days for her to make. I wasn't going to sit down and make art for 8 days. I had a program. I had to work on other things. So delegation is a very important tool. And so what I'm also going to say is if you are making a game but you don't have any design principles or you haven't established how the game's design is actually going to be, concreted, that you're in trouble because now you're at this iterative state where you're just adding and adding and adding, but you don't necessarily know what works, what outputs you're looking for, what are the things that you're seeking. So it's just super fundamental to make sure that you know what you're designing, but then also know how to design the design process. I say this because one, there's a lot of videos that I made on this channel that go ahead and talks about that. But two, if you just truly cannot explain the cause and effect of your game mechanics and what they look like and all the goals that you're supposed to have in your game, then you're basically building aimlessly. And again, that's what ends up creating these very, very, very long development cycles. All right. So make sure you establish your designs first, then do the roadmap, then make sure that you can get rid of the dependencies, then know how you're going to tackle content. And that's basically the simplest way to have a productive pipeline of making games quickly. The last thing I'm going to say is, playtesting is critical, super important. You always want to get good feedback. You want to get criticism. You want to know what works. You want to know what actually works. And the best way to do that is by watching gameplay of your games or letting players play through it and give a survey result and just see what is being measured, what can be improved. Make sure that you have ways to capture data on your game. Most of these pieces of data are going to be qualitative. They're going to be more assessments based. They're not necessarily quantifiable in the numerical way, like, hey, how many bullets did you shoot? Like, okay, maybe that works, but that's not necessarily relevant for the whole conception of the game, right? So if you implement capture systems in your playtests, in your builds, in your demos, even in the final build, right? That's always going to be helpful for you to understand what you need to do to continue improving your game. These are the techniques you can use right now to just speedrun the pipeline process at a ridiculous rate. Finally, we're going to talk about the bulletproof mindset you can use to override any circumstance whenever you're working on a project or working towards a goal. And the first one is very obvious and simple, but we need to be reminded that we need to focus on what actually matters. For us developers, it's making sure that players are satisfied, that we launch a game without bugs, it's presentable, it's fun, we get good reviews, basic obvious stuff, right? And even if for some reason you're not a developer, what I just want to express is that for every work or effort you put or apply in any project or goal, you always want to make sure that you have some level of return of investment no matter what. Of course, the only exception is if you're having leisure time, a hobby, something that's fun for you, right? But in any work that's professional or serious or has large, tremendous amounts of work, it is very critical to make sure that you get something back. And what other way could you do this by simply focusing on what actually matters, right? The next part here is probably going to be a rant from my end, but I do want to express that yes, life is busy. We have responsibilities and we have a lot to do. As humans, we have a full-time job. You are probably a caregiver. Maybe you have a child, maybe you take care of children, maybe you have to take care of your own parents. Maybe that's not the case, but you still have hobbies or lifestyles, relationships, maybe you practice faith a lot. There's a lot of things that we're always going to be occupied with. What I really want to say here is you should never view all of these collateral amounts of actions that we have to take in activities as an excuse, but rather as an opportunity to prove how you're still able to do and deal with everything when it comes to development. I say this because I've had multiple clients who were full-time parents, full-time workers, individuals that only had 1 hour per day to actually make something, and they were still able to not only create their games but launch it on time as well. This is why it's so important to recognize how important it is to recognize how much time you have, and more importantly, how you can allocate it to best benefit your day, your week, your month, your year. It's so critical to say, oh, I'm super busy. There's a bunch of things I have to do. There's hangouts, there's travels, there's work, there's this, there's that. But an hour is an hour. Half an hour is half an hour. There's a lot you can do with a little. And it just really comes down to understanding how you can use what you have and just narrowing down and focusing on the things that actually matter and making sure that you actually make progress with that. So, for example, if you only had just an hour of day to develop the game, but you also had a list and a roadmap of every single possible items you needed to do to actually make sure you can launch it, well, if you do the math, you're actually just going to make straight progress. Now, if you're iterative, if you're exploring, you're experimenting, you're trying to see what happens, you don't have that much time, yeah, development's going to take forever. And so this is why it's so important to recognize, yeah, you can be busy and, you choose how you want to spend your time, but 1 hour is 1 hour and you can do a lot with that. The next thing I'm going to talk about is when you're a developer, eventually you have to launch your game, you have to showcase it, you have to market it, and you're going to have a lot of opinions, a lot of positive ones, a lot of negative ones. And there's sometimes there I've talked to many clients and many developers, and there's that like hunch of like, oh well, what if they don't like my game? What if I upload something that's not necessarily agreeable with? What if I put something online and I just don't get the reception that I want? So what I'm going to say, controversial, but part of human nature is just we tend to want to be in a tribe. We tend to want to be in a community. We want to be accepted for who we are. And I really think it's important to recognize that as an individual, you have the ability to recognize where you want to go to, and you make your choices at the end of the day. But I also do believe that you can surrender the ability to care about opinions if you just accept the fact that, hey, people are going to judge you anyway. Okay, if you are going to make a game and it's very niche and a lot of people just don't like it because of the artwork or something else, one, you could always design for appeal, another conversation for another time. But two, if you really are afraid of what people are thinking and such, you have to also think about those that actually do like your game and those that care about it. All I'm saying is you are more likely to move forward in your life when you stop shackling yourself for the approval and the opinions of others. And this is very important for developers because, again, you'll be working on a project for months, maybe even years, depending on like how long you actually want to take and how much you apply your work with and such. But the issue with this is if you are too afraid to showcase what you're doing, or if you kind of like hesitate because, again, you're worried about other people's opinion, you're very much devaluing the respect that you have for your work. You have to put your work out there. You just have to go ahead and share, and you have to make sure that, I'm not saying to be prideful about it, but you absolutely would just want to make sure that you did this for the players. You did it for a part of your portfolio. You did it because you wanted to push things forward. But at the same time, you're gonna get good and you're gonna get a lot of bad opinions. And all I'm gonna tell you is, hey, like, and what? Somebody said something bad, and what? Just move on. Okay. There's way more. There's way more things you can do going forward than trying to get some person's approval. And I also put this image of a computer screen because, like, the reality is right now I'm behind a computer screen telling you this, right? You're probably watching this from a computer screen or a phone. I get it, things happen. But, like, the reality of the matter is, like, hey, words are words. Unless it's, like, actually good, tangible feedback that's constructive criticism that can help you out and everything, yeah, that's going to be helpful and such. But, doesn't matter if the opinion is good or if it's bad. Just go ahead and dismiss it, keep going forward, and just keep being as productive as possible, all right? At the same token, I'm also going to say, and again, I'm saying don't be prideful, don't do this, don't do that, right? Like there's things that you have to pay attention to, but I also do believe us developers need to be more brazen with our milestones, right? When a developer says something amongst the lines like, "Oh yeah, I want to make a game and get experience and see how it goes and let's go with the flow." Fine, fair. Like that's absolutely, we can acknowledge that. We can go ahead and recognize that's not a bad thing at all. But I do think that you shouldn't be shy with your goals. If you're like, hey, I want to make a game that makes a lot of money. I want to make a game that goes viral. I want to make a game that gets downloaded by a bunch of people and it gets recognized and it's really good. I would tell you it's okay to approve that mindset and say, yeah, you know what, let's do it. Let's go ahead and make something worth making, Because it's super easy to say, oh, let's go with the flow. Let's see what happens. But that mindset implies you don't have a target, you don't have direction, you don't have an endpoint. Your endpoint should always be crystal clear. It should be defined. It should be concrete. It should be as polished as possible so that you know what you're seeking and your decisions will help you reach that goal no matter what. So if you said, hey, I want to make a game that's $1 million, right? Yeah, you might sound crazy saying that, but like what is stopping you? Who's judging you? Who's stopping you from doing that, right? You can make decisions in a game that can end up being published, and then you can like make multiple millions if you actually wanted to. There's a study behind that. There's designs that you have to do, choices you have to make, investments you have to make, resources you have to find. Like there's a bunch of systems and processes to get there. But the point is that path exists. Why would you be shy on taking that path? You know what I mean? If I'm telling you, hey, like you're making a game, are you confident on it? And you don't feel confident about it, well, that could be a personal opinion and such. But what I'm trying to express here is you want to be brazen. You want to be bold. You want to say, you know what, let's do it because this is the goal and I'm very clear about that. And I'm going to make sure that I move mountains to make sure that this happens. Okay. That's going to be very helpful for you because that like microaggression of like going forward with your goals will push you to make stronger, sharper choices. Being said, you also always want to improve your skills no matter what. On your left, you can see the very first version of Dodge King, which, questionable, right? But then, like a couple of years later, you see on your right my new demo, Another Chance at Happiness. A lot of things going on. This is a very short clip. But you can see there's a massive improvement in both art style, gameplay, game feel, music. Of course, you're not going to hear the sounds right now, but there's just a lot of improvement. You can only reach one place to another by improving, and you can only improve if you proactively make the choice to do better every single day. If I made the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over without being proactive on it, I'm just going to have the same results. But if I make a decision where I'm like, hey, I did this art. Oh, let's work on the color. Oh, let's work on the lighting. Oh, let's work on textures. Oh, let's work on the effects. Oh, let's work on camera shakes. Like every single time you make a step forward that improves your overall skill, and in every domain and dominion possible, by the way, not just game dev, but again in your health, in your life, in your socializing, in your ability to just become who you are as yourself, right? Always find a way to improve. It'll help you long term, and it'll very much sharpen your ability to manage how you want to live your life. Which leads to my next point is you are the director of your own life, okay? You could have reached this part of the video and dismissed every single thing that I said, and that's totally fine because that is your choice, okay? You choose what you want to do with your life, whether it's good, bad. Just recognize that every choice has a consequence, everything has a sacrifice, everything has a payoff. If you really wanted to do everything possible in your life, there are going to be some consequences for that. If you just want to focus on one individual thing, that's going to be great, good for you, do what you got to do, but then also you're missing out on some other things. All I'm saying is you are truly the one that has the power and the choice of how you allocate your time, how you allocate your resources, how you make your choices, how you go about life, how you make your games, how you make improvements, how you develop your skills, what type of content you watch, what type of content you're not watching, if you're blocking yourself, if you're having the ability to fight distractions, if you don't get distracted, if you do get distracted, if you have good friends, if you have bad friends. Like all of these decisions truly come down to you as an individual. Be sharp about it. And the last thing I'm going to say is that there is a high probability that you got to this point of the video and you said, you know what, I am a game developer, and either you haven't started or you have started or you're a veteran. The whole point is if you joined game dev, you probably, I might be wrong, but you probably have the mindset of, I did this because I wanted to be the best developer out there. And the reality is that is the mission that you have. Okay, everyone has a goal, everyone has a purpose and such. And I genuinely believe that if you are a game developer, you should be giving your best no matter what. So always remember that no matter what you do, whether it's a good game you're making, whether it's your 10th game you're making, whether the next game is going to be the game of the year that you end up making, always strive to be the best at what you do, no matter what. In all domains as well, right? But for game developers, always try to be the best developer, no matter what. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for reaching this part of the video. Hope this was extremely helpful for you. If there was any more pieces of advice or techniques you wanted to learn more about, I have a channel where I cover a bunch of topics about how to accelerate the speedrunning process of game dev. So go ahead and check out my channel whenever possible. And if you're interested in booking a call or wanting to learn more, please go ahead and check the description down below for more information. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.